to another edition of a rushed rush through the weekly rushes. Yeah, where I drink coffee, though I haven't got one in front of me right now, and I go at breakneck speed through the streaming and movie news, and sometimes TV news, that's hit the headlines this week. First of all, the Alec Baldwin story is once again in the press. This is principally because Alec Baldwin has done an interview with ABC News in America. It's a very emotional interview by all accounts. I haven't watched the full interview, but there are some excerpts that have been reported in the news. And the most curious one of all is probably his statement that he didn't pull the trigger. His direct quote actually from the interview is this: "I didn't pull the trigger. No, 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 no. I would never point a gun at anyone and pull the trigger. Never. That was the training I had. You don't point a gun at anyone and pull the trigger." The suggestion here being, he talks in more detail about the fact that he was trained never to actually obviously pull the trigger, he says that quite clearly, but that he pulled back the sort of hammer. And so when he cocked the gun, she said, just let the sort of hammer, release the hammer at the back, and the bullet flew out and hit her. He claims that it's unlikely that he's going to be criminally charged with manslaughter or murder. And in fact, apparently it's being reported that Helena Hutchins' husband reputedly said to Alec Baldwin, "I guess we're going to go through the aftermath of this together," therein being a sort of an acknowledgement that despite Alec Baldwin actually firing the gun, or the gun accidentally going off essentially, Alec Baldwin's trauma will be in a different way as extreme as Helena Hutchins' husband. But again, he sort of states quite clearly, Alec Baldwin, that he's not going to be criminally charged probably, and that he didn't pull the trigger, and that's caused a bit of confusion and has been quite a sort of heavily reported headline. Now, this is a curious one. This is about the British Board of Film Classification. That's the people who give us the certificates, whether it be a 12A, a 12, a PG, a U, all those kind of things, 15 and 18, obviously. Now, they're tightening the age ratings for certain films that contain racist language. Content featuring the N-word will not be classified as lower than 12A or 12 other than in extreme circumstances. The only exception is if they're sort of in the film for educational purposes. The British Board of Film Classifications have conducted this research amongst people to see what preferences are around these things, and I just wanted to gain a sense of what you think of this. Do you think it's right to up the kind of threshold for certificates? Some people want to shield their children from racism, but others believe that there's a huge value in children experiencing or witnessing or hearing, so long as the film obviously doesn't support racism, hearing how racist language historically was used. I'm thinking of films about civil rights movements, stuff like that, where the N-word would be used, and yet in a sense it's educational, but in another sense it's also entertainment insofar as it's just a fiction film. The spat with Ridley Scott and the Gucci family just keeps on continuing. I mean, Ridley Scott is coming in for a bit of stick here, and he pushes back once again. One of the Gucci family, I think the granddaughter of Aldo Gucci, who is played by Al Pacino, has called out the appearance of Al Pacino and Jared Leto in the film. She says it's an insult to the legacy on which the brand is built today. "My grandfather," she says, "was a very handsome man like all the Guccis and very tall. Blue eyes and very elegant. He's being played by Al Pacino, who's not very tall already, and this photo shows him as fat, short, with sideburns." Ridley Scott pushes back on this in inimitable style. I mean, he had a crack at millennials not liking The Last Duel because they're on their fucking phones all the time, as we reported last week. This time he takes a swipe at the Gucci family. "The people that were writing from the family," he says to us at the onset, "were alarmingly insulting, saying that Al Pacino does not represent physically Aldo Gucci in any shape or form. And yet, frankly, how could they be better represented?" he says. "Excuse me, you probably have the best actors in the world. You should be so fucking lucky." Doesn't mince his words, Ridley Scott. Even at 84, he's just kicking back. This story is a curious one, and this story is one of two stories that is not necessarily about intentionally fake prosecutions or criminal activities, but they're kind of connected. Alice Sebold, an author, she's written another book called Lucky. It was about to be adapted into a film. Lucky is a memoir about Alice Sebold's experiences of being raped when she was younger. Anthony Broadwater was convicted, and apparently, right down to this detail, Alice Sebold didn't even identify him in a lineup of possible suspects. The conviction was overturned last week due to, and this is the most remarkable bit, due to evidence sought after and found by the previous director, Mucciante. He obviously got close to the project, smelt a bit of a rat and decided to actually look into it. And so Broadwater, the chap who was accused of rape, has been has actually had the conviction quashed. He's been cleared. He was in prison, I think, for about 16 years or something like that, or he's certainly sentenced to 16 years. Alice Sebold has since issued a statement apologising for this. I don't think she intentionally meant him to be sent down, but, you know, a miscarriage of justice was carried out here, and consequently the film that was being made of Lucky has been scratched. Now, I don't know if you remember the actor Jussie Smollett from Empire, the TV series. He claimed that he'd been beaten up in a homophobic and racist attack. Well, it appears that a colleague of his, another actor on Empire, admitted to being hired by Smollett to essentially beat him up, rough him up, in the attempt and hope by Smollett of improving his career. He was paid to fake beat him up, in the exact words of the chap on the film. So if Smollett is found to have essentially lied, exaggerated, fabricated this story, he could face up to 4 years in prison. So again, it's another story, do you see what I mean, that kind of revolves around who's telling the truth, who was right, who did do something wrong, or who didn't do something wrong. Helen Mirren, you know me, and prosthetics. I'm not necessarily a big fan of prosthetics and wigs. Sometimes worry that what you should do is actually hire an actor who looks the age rather than making people or prostheticizing people into looking the age. Helen Mirren, photos of Helen Mirren have been swashing around the internet this week as she is set to represent the former Israeli Iron Lady, Golda Meir, Prime Minister of Israel. Golda Meir, as Helen Mirren says, was a formidable, intransigent and powerful leader. I think it's caused a little bit of a hoo-ha insofar as I think many Israelis believe that perhaps a Jewish actress should have taken on the part. But Helen Mirren goes on to say it's a great challenge to portray her at the most difficult moment of her extraordinary life. But the story really is the transformation. And look at the photos that I've popped up. What do you think? Do you think it's always wise to prosthetize? I mean, interesting for Helen Mirren that at her age, she's in her 70s, that she can be prostheticized to look even older. It's a tribute to how fresh and youthful Helen Mirren looks. This is a weird one. Robbie Williams is having a biopic made of his life by the director of The Greatest Showman, Michael Gracie. Intriguing. It gets even more intriguing. It's called Better Man. It's due to start shooting in Australia in 2022, which is now just around the corner. It doesn't sound so far away. But the film is going to look into those experiences that shaped Robbie Williams' career, his profile. I'm hoping and I'm thinking that his struggles with addiction and what have you will be in there too, have an abundance of respect for the way in which he's conquered his addictions. But the most interesting part of this story is that Robbie Williams, wait for it, is going to be represented, wait for it, as a CGI monkey. I kid you not. The director, as I say, the director of The Greatest Showman, is quoted as saying it's so important when they watch this story, the audience, and look at the screen that they literally think I've never seen this before. Well, for sure. I mean, Robbie Williams played by a CGI monkey. I haven't seen that before. All I can say is the approach is top secret. I guess the monkey bit isn't, but how it's going to be contextualized is a secret. But the goal is to generate that feeling I just described. It's this fantastical story, and I want to represent it in its harsh reality all the way to these moments of pure fantasy. Could it be a little bit like that Coldplay music video where they were all played by gorillas? Is that right? I think they were all played by gorillas or chimpanzees. Was it chimpanzees? Finally, Nick Cage is going to be playing Dracula in a new film called Renfield, which is based on Dracula's essentially sort of sidekick / assistant. Renfield is going to be played by Nicholas Hoult, who's a fabulous actor. He was in Skins. He was a horrendous villain in the true story of the Kelly gang. Awkwafina is joining the film, and the reason the Awkwafina joining the cast is an interesting moment is it makes you wonder whether this film is actually going to have something of a comedic skew to it, because Nick Cage playing Dracula, either he's going to take it to batshit crazy levels, but this is a film made by Universal. They're sort of relaunching their monster franchise, if you like. They have Frankenstein, Dracula, the Invisible Man, the Werewolf, all these guys. And in a sense, what they did with Elizabeth Moss's performance in The Invisible Man was reposition and remix and repackage and then throw at the audience a sort of different manifestation of the Invisible Man. Are they going to do something similar here? I like the fact that they're focusing on the side character who himself comes from an asylum or was believed to be mad, but is in fact working on Dracula's behalf. So there you have the main news stories of the week. So what films are being released this week? Well, Silent Night is coming out, starring Keira Knightley. I'm not entirely sure I'm buying into the kind of concept of this. A bunch of friends, I think quite posh friends, all gather together for a dinner party. Okay, but weirdly, outside of this dinner party, something apocalyptic is happening to the world. The world is coming to an end, and they proceed to drink wine, play games, give each other gifts, and chew the cud, I guess, whilst outside their house, outside the dinner party, the world falls apart. I can't quite get my head around it. I guess it has some kind of festive feel to it, though do they die? I don't know. So you've got Silent Night. You've also got Come On, Come On. This is the film I'm most excited about this week. This stars Joaquin Phoenix, in which he kind of essentially goes on a road movie with his younger nephew, played by a newcomer, Woody Norman. We've seen the trailer. It looks emotional. It looks very hip. It's beautifully shot. I think we get quite a nuanced, low-key, but intense performance from Joaquin Phoenix. Kind of his first performance since Joker, so I think it's going to be sat at the opposite end of things, and it's going to be about the conflict that he feels or the difficulties he encounters looking after a young boy. I love films in which there's that sort of much older adult combined with a younger child, and that sort of frisson of kind of comedy and confusion, and you know, the innocence of youth versus the experience of adulthood. I like that contrast. I mean, an obvious example is the movie Up from Pixar, so I'm hoping for a bit of that from this. And the other big sort of tentpole action movie is Resident Evil. I've never played the game, but it is based on a computer game. I guess we're going to get lots of that sort of first-person shoot-'em-up sort of stuff, lots of creatures, lots of monsters. It's a reimagining of a computer game. So if you fancy a sort of spectacle, big screen bonanza of just flesh and monster and shooting up, that's your film. And there you have the weekly rushes, a rushed rush through the weekly rushes. Tell us what you think, tell us what you feel.